and welcome to The Consistency Project, the first episode of The Consistency Project with E.C. Sinkowski. My name is Patrick Cummings, and every week I'll have the distinct pleasure of presenting E.C. with one of your questions on subject matters that are going to range from nutrition, fitness, to the choices we can all make to live a healthier, more functional life. By exploring both those principles at play and the tactics worth carrying out as a result, our aim is to get you thinking, to get you moving, and to get us all taking more consistent action toward optimizing our well-being. How you doing, E.C.?
I'm awesome. First episode.
Yeah. Before we get into it, let's talk real quick about why a podcast. What are you thinking about? What are you excited about? What are our near-term goals for this?
Yeah. I mean, I think what my message has been pretty consistent in social media is just this notion of really hammering the basics really well. And I think what we find in our overall nation's health is we've totally missed that. You know, we're worried about all these specifics when 80% of people aren't eating enough fruits and vegetables, 70% of people are overweight or obese, we're not sleeping enough, we're not exercising enough. And it's just like, hey, let's not focus on all this other stuff. Let's come back to the basics. And what's interesting is so many concerns that we have that are a little bit more high level do actually tend to go better when we first focus on the basics. So I just wanted this to be a platform that really expands on some of those ideas that I talk about in social media, which you can't always capture with one picture and a caption.
Right. You can try. You do a good job trying, though.
Oh man, it's tough.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do. Every episode, we're going to tackle one question. We're going to let you kind of do a deep dive on one listener's question, see if we can kind of look at it from every angle, both to figure out what it is folks should know in terms of what kind of information, what kind of context they need, and then what kind of actions they can take as a result of understanding this thing a little bit better. And so today's question, we're going to talk about detoxes. And the question is, I've got friends who've done all sorts of detoxes, cleanses, fasting, and juice-only diets to try to clean out the system. Is that something you recommend people do to jumpstart a recommitment to healthier eating? And so where would you begin with that question? What's the 30,000 foot answer to, is this idea of a juice cleanse, a fast, whatever, a detox, is that even something that you recommend at all?
Yeah, I mean, the 30,000 foot view is no. That's going to be the short answer and, hey, skip it, try something else. Mm-hmm. But I think we first have to kind of understand what we mean when we say detox. I think it's just this notion of, kind of like cleaning up your house or some sort of, cleaning out your car, like it's a quick sort of clean.
Yeah.
When we're talking about detoxification, we're talking about the body to process what are known as xenobiotics. So any sort of foreign substance that doesn't have a health promoting property to it. This could be antibiotics. I mean, you could say that could be health promoting in the sense of, some sort of infection, but antibiotics or other pharmaceuticals, environmental pollutants. But then we also actually have to detoxify some endogenous compounds, or that means within our own body, things like our steroid hormones, like testosterone and estrogen. You can't just have excess estrogen produced. And so this is what the body is trying to do. It's trying to break these chemicals down and then eliminate them. And so it's first understanding that that's what's going on. And there's really three big things that I would want someone to understand about this detoxification process. The first is, it's not something that we start and stop. It's not something that we're like, I want to go on a juice cleanse. Today's the day I'm starting and now my body will detoxify. I mean, Thankfully, our body is already doing this constantly and quite well. It's primarily through the liver, but a lot of different organs have this, kidney, included. And this is why we do things like urinate. We go to the bathroom. These are big sources of elimination. This is what's happening all the time anyway. And so I'd want people to think about detoxification as something that's just constant. And yes, we have some influence over it, but it's not like I'm doing a juice cleanse and therefore I am detoxifying. It's not an on-off switch.
Mm-hmm. Why is it that you think an idea like this has taken hold? Because obviously it has. I mean, I think it's hard to not kind of stumble into, again, juice cleanses, detoxes, whatever. What is it that people think it's doing that that maybe they're mistaken about, or that isn't actually happening, or that there's a better way to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is that they think that they need these specific periods. Now, that does sort of lead into the second concept that I kind of wanted to touch on with detoxification, and that is like, what is actually necessary with detoxification? I think people and marketing have made us to believe that you actually need nothing, or these juice fasts or these water fasts close to nothing to detoxify. But what your body actually uses to detoxify are a lot of different nutrients, including amino acids from proteins, including lots of different vitamins and minerals. And so I think some of the marketing that's around fasting and detoxification pushes people to think that they actually need nothing or almost nothing, when really detoxification is going to be optimized with high quality ingredients. Now, I did want to bring up kind of an interesting thought there, and why there's some half truth with this kind of marketing claims is if you take someone who has a standard American diet, not really a ton of vitamins and minerals, and maybe even low on the protein, and you switch them to a juice fast that has, I don't know, a good amount of vitamins and minerals, it might actually be better from a detoxification standpoint from where they were, but it's not necessarily an ideal form of detoxification. You're not really supplying that process.
Yeah, I feel like that's something you talk about a lot, which is, and I mean, you kind of alluded to it at the start, but this overemphasis on, I don't know what it is, but like specificity or tactics when the foundation is leaky, right? Is that what we're talking about here? Or is that what you're kind of talking about there, which is that an improvement from crap is still an improvement. It might just not be the greatest approach, right?
Yeah, totally. And I mean, and we have to recognize that with diets, and that's something I talk about a lot, that just because you've made an improvement doesn't mean we're at ideal. And the same thing is true with detoxification. You know, like people might start drinking lemon juice and they get their vitamin C, which is great, and you need that for detoxification, but that's a small part of the overall process of detoxification. And so it's really taking kind of this bigger view and realizing that it's never one thing, which is a concept and a principle I talk about a lot, and that we really need a whole host of things to operate optimally.
Mm-hmm. And one of those things I imagine is consistency, since this is what we talk about a lot here, or what we're going to talk about a lot here. But that idea that, like, yeah, it's not a 10-day thing, right? It's actually what do you need to do over the course of years and your life, right?
Totally. I mean, that's one of the big problems about the 10-day stuff, the 7-day fast or whatever. It's like, well, what happens after 7 days? I mean, like that's a very, hopefully, small blip in your life for most people. When you think about these fasts, it's like, that's not going to have any significant impact on your health, a 7-day thing. And so let's set up the system in a way that will, and it's going to be all these small gains across as many days as possible as we can in your life. The other thing that I wanted to kind of just touch on with this detoxification process is how complicated and intricate it is. I think we hear these things about like detoxification. It's like, oh, the body gets rid of chemicals. And it's like, yeah, in a multi-step process with a bunch of different compounds that are needed, all have genetic influence that are going to be different from me to you, that are also influenced by other medications that are taking, that are also influenced by my diet. What compound are we detoxifying? What was your environmental exposure? And so it's this idea that, like, we can talk about detoxification, we can talk about going to have your lemon juice water, but like, is that actually doing anything for what your detoxification problem is? And probably getting to that level of specificity, no, because we just don't know enough about the system yet. I mean, we're still learning how different foods and nutrients can alter this system. And just as a quick example to help people kind of understand this, I think caffeine sensitivity is a great example. You probably know the person, not me, who can have a cup of coffee at 9 p.m. and still sleep. Yep. They have a fast detoxification system for caffeine. They're able to break it down very quickly so they don't even feel the effects. Then we have those people who, let's say they can't have caffeine after noon. That's more like me. Yep. And then there's people who are very sensitive to it. And that shows the range just for caffeine, right? But now let's take that complicated system and apply it to every different compound we're detoxifying, combined with other medications, combined with your environmental exposure alone. And you see that the system isn't just like, should I drink more lemon juice? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is there's an interesting tension anyways in this conversation about simplifying or simplification, because it's something that you do really well and you talk about a lot and really effectively, is bringing things back to basics, simplifying it so that you can actually figure out what to do. But what I'm hearing is like, yeah, but you can go too simple. You can be overly or, too overly simplistic, right? And that's interesting to me that there's places where simplicity is the right answer, and there's places where simplicity is a marketing trick.
Yeah. No, I love that point. And I think we can take the concept of eating mostly whole foods, right? That's something I say all the time, and it's a very simple concept. But one of the reasons why that's so powerful, or like eat a diverse array of whole foods, right, is that by saying that, we're incorporating so many nutrients. So it's ultimately not that simple. It's when we get so reductionist to think about one nutrient in that combination is when we've gotten too simple. And so that's where, like, I think sometimes people think these things of like exercise and like sleep and, eat a diverse array of whole foods are too simple, but they're actually attacking, multi-nutrients, multi-system functions. And therefore they're actually not that simple in their effect.
Love that. Okay. So we've got a good sense of, I think, why a fast, a juice cleanse, a detox, maybe doesn't work, or at least doesn't work in the to the degree that people hope. What would you say to folks who, what are the next steps? What would you say to folks who, you want to still help in that direction, but in an effective means? Where do they go from here?
Yeah, I always try to encourage people to start on the sustainable route. Instead of jumping down the 7-day fast or the 10-day fast. It's like one of the things I always like to ask people is, what did you have for breakfast? It really could be any meal, but let's just focus on what you ate last. Let's see if there's any improvements we can have there. And can we make improvements in that over time? Because the way that I see these, resets and fasts, it's almost like wasted time because you've now spent 10 days doing a practice that you actually know in your heart you're not going to continue for very long.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, if you really want to get muscle ups, it's spending 10 days on your running, form. It's like, why don't you go work on the muscle up? And so I would say the same thing about nutrition. It's like all of these extreme choices. Hey, why don't we just take that time and make something that's actually going to stick with you and work on that habit? So I do try to force people kind of back to the sustainable route. And then the caveat there, though, is always sometimes when people learn something isn't sustainable, it's still worth it. So even if they're so dead set on this 7-day whatever, and at the end of 7 days, they're like, well, that did nothing. Well, it's like, okay, well, good. We don't have to deal with that concept anymore. So, sometimes it's like, if they're really set on it, it's like, all right, do it,
Yeah.
and I'll see you in 7 days.
Right. What is it that you think, why are they so attractive? Right. We can blame marketing. We can do whatever, but like, there's got to be something in there about a 7-day or 10-day thing that is attractive to folks who do say yes to that. Do you have any sense of what it is, what that might be, and what maybe we could replace that with, or how you would talk to them about understanding that you're aiming for this, but actually you're not hitting that?
Yeah, I think the concept of forever is really hard to latch onto. I think it's hard. I think it's hard to mentally get your head around, like, oh, this is it forever, and that's sort of what my message is in nutrition. Now, I certainly don't think that, fruits and vegetables and sleep are going to cure everything, but I think it's a foundation that we have to operate from forever. And so when people hear 7 days, 10 days, they can get their mind around, well, I can do this for 7 days. I can do this for 10 days. Like, yeah, I can do this. But when you say, this is what you have to do for the rest of your life, it's like, oh gosh. Right. So I think there's a little bit of that mental pushback, or at least mental buy-in with the shorter duration stuff. How do I convince people? I don't know. I don't know if it's only after frustration they're willing to try, or the fact that I can speak to some of the physiology that maybe is convincing, or, maybe they're just ready for something new. But yeah, I think it's just a constant message. And if I could find any parallel in their life, most people, I think, view nutrition a little bit differently than a lot of other pursuits. But when you talk about being successful in your career, or, I don't know, parenting, it's like patience and long-term game, right?
Right.
So find something else that has this like day in, day out where you have to show up. And guess what? It's the same thing with nutrition.
One of the things that pops into my head when talking about this idea of cleanses and detox is something like a Whole30 type diet, or experience. And it's something that I've done once or twice. The basic idea being kind of strip everything away except, what they deem to be the kind of essential nutrients and foods. And then once you kind of get everything, quote unquote, out of your system, you can then start to slowly reintroduce, something like dairy or whatever it is that you thought might be an issue, so that you can see like, okay, how do you actually respond to these foods, and how do you feel after you have a piece of bread now that you've kind of cleaned yourself out a little bit? Is that a detox? Is that a reset? Is that something different? Like, where do you draw the line of one versus the other? And I don't want to pick on Whole30 or say that's certainly the only version of this that is out there, but it is probably the only one that I've tried. And so curious what your take is on that. Is that a detox? Is that a reset? Or is that something, kind of like we talked about before, is that something that appears simple, but is actually rather complex when you get kind of into it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the Whole30 isn't quite the classic detox cleanse, right? I mean, first of all, they recommend a range of whole foods, including protein, right? So with the Whole30, you can get a lot more nutrients to do detoxification optimally. So if it was kind of on a scale of like detoxification things like cleanses would be at one end, and Whole30 is getting a lot closer to optimal, That being said, I think the Whole30 has helped millions of people, which is awesome. Yeah. I also don't agree with all of the eliminations on a physiological basis. I also don't think they're necessary. And so when we're looking at this idea of elimination, that can be a very, very powerful way for people to address nutrition, not just from a physiological basis, but also a psychological basis. But I actually don't recommend it much, largely because of that strict elimination protocol. Let me tell you how to get people to quit something in nutrition. Tell them they can't have something they want.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of realism lost there. Now, I've done times when I do no sugar, or I've done times when I do no alcohol, no caffeine, so I can really understand that its effect. But I only recommend that to people that are a little bit further along in their nutrition journey, where we've built up some momentum, where we've built up some consistency with just the basics of whole food, before we get to these kind of strict eliminations, so that they have the motivation and the kind of self-awareness to stick with it. Versus somebody going from standard American to Whole30, I would say it's a pretty tough transition. And I don't know that it's really necessary, right? In fact, there's foods they eliminate that I don't agree with at all. Like, I think beans are great. Keep them in. And actually can help with detoxification from a fiber perspective, even, we could argue.
You had mentioned earlier, one that our bodies are always detoxifying. That's part of the process of what's happening. Is there value in, and is it even possible to ramp up that detoxification process? Like, is there a reason why I would want to do that at some point? And if so, are there other ways to enhance, speed up, amplify the process of detoxification in some way?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can help the process by having adequate protein and a diverse array of fruits and vegetables. Detoxification is one of the many reasons why I recommend, 800-gram challenge and lazy macros as a basis, right? Mm-hmm. There's so many systems that adequate protein and lots of fruits and veggies can address, and detoxification is one of them. So somebody who doesn't have adequate protein and adequate fruits and veggies each day, that's a way to, quote, ramp up to a more optimal detoxification. Now, we also have to remember that there are going to be cases of people who truly have environmental exposures, whether or not it was lead paint exposure or some job they worked in a mine or something like that, where they might actually have to go through a process of detoxification. But I think that's a little bit outside the scope of here. Like, I'm talking about, people living normal lives, thinking that they need to like ramp up their detoxification system any more than just eating a better diet. Mm-hmm. And exercising too. I mean, that's something else to really hit on. So, you can store chemicals in fat. And so that's another reason why exercise and maintaining a healthy weight is actually part of detoxification. If you don't have excess fat stores, within reasons of health, you're not storing an excess load of these contaminants. And so that's why weight loss can also be a detoxification. But that doesn't mean that we, ramp it up in a 10-day thing. That's like, okay, we're committing to exercise forever and we'll lose weight gradually in a sustainable way.
Mm-hmm. As we wrap up, is there anything else about detox cleanses worth talking about, worth pointing out, worth bringing up before we wrap up?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I think, oh man, the marketing around this stuff really gets to me. I think just be aware of the half truths. If anything has, and I'm going to keep picking on vitamin C, but if anything has vitamin C in it, they can call it's an anti-inflammatory. They can call it, a detoxification system. And so it's like, okay, that's true. It's part of those processes, but it's not really the end all be all. And so, it's kind of the classic phrase, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And it's true with detoxification, right? Like if you think that you're going to do this in 7 days with one type of juice, it's probably gotten a little too simple.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so this is an experiment. We are planning to do a handful of these episodes. Where is how or what's the best way to reach out to you to let us know what folks think? Give us some feedback. Give us some ideas. Where's the best place to reach you?
Yeah, definitely any of the social media, active on Instagram and Facebook, mostly Optimize Me Nutrition. And then they can always just email info@optimizemenutrition.com with comments, or even just comments on wherever this is posted. Anything is helpful.
Perfect. Thank you so much, EC. We'll see everybody next week.
Thanks.